Coming up on The World Today. Former U.S. President Barack Obama attends the COP26 meetings today, says transforming dirty energy to clean energy does have a cost. The first funeral for victims of the ASTROWORLD crash holds in Texas. Plus, India's Tamil Nadu state is inundated by floods caused by heavy rains. A warm welcome, everyone, to the program, and thanks for joining us. I'm Jokia Rogers. It's Adaptation, Loss and Damage Day at the Climate Summit in Glasgow. And showing up today is former U.S. President Barack Obama, who says transitioning from dirty energy to clean energy does have a cost, and that it's unreasonable for people who are economically vulnerable to think that some of those costs will be borne by them and not by the more powerful and privileged. He says that's why, when it comes to climate change, a country like the United States has to do more than countries like Mali or Bangladesh.
Paris showed the world that progress is possible, created a framework. Important work was done there, and important work has been done here. That is the good news. Now for the bad news. We are nowhere near where we need to be yet. For starters, despite the progress that Paris represented, most countries have failed to meet the action plans that they set 6 years ago. Most nations have failed to be as ambitious as they need to be. The escalation, the ratcheting up of ambition that we anticipated in Paris 6 years ago has not been uniformly realized. I have to confess, it was particularly discouraging to see the leaders of two of the world's largest emitters, China and Russia, decline to even attend the proceedings. And their national plans so far reflect what appears to be a dangerous lack of urgency, a willingness to maintain the status quo on the part of those governments. And that's a shame. We need advanced economies like the U.S. and Europe leading on this issue. But you know the facts. We also need China and India leading on this issue. We need Russia leading on this issue, just as we need Indonesia and South Africa and Brazil leading on this issue. We can't afford anybody on the sidelines.
In the meantime, youth activists continue to put pressure on the United States to deliver on contributions to a $100 billion climate fund. During Mr. Obama's first term in office in 2009, he traveled to the UN Climate Summit in Copenhagen, where he intervened in negotiations with other world leaders that resulted in an agreement that, for the first time, called for emission pledges by all major economies, not just industrialized nations. At the same summit, rich nations promised to hand developing countries $100 billion a year by 2020 to help them adapt to climate change. The target was missed, and at COP26, richer nations say they will meet the goal by 2023 at the latest, with some hoping it could be delivered a year earlier.
The U.S. is the country that is historically most responsible for the climate crisis, and yet they have barely done anything. They have promised so much, they have pledged so much, but they're still not doing enough. Even their pledges, which they don't even have actual milestones to get to and plans to get to, aren't enough considering the amount of emissions, amount of pollution, amount of injustices that they have done to the rest of the world. I definitely think that President Obama is a disappointment because he lauded himself as the black president who cared about the people of color, but if he did, he wouldn't have failed us. He wouldn't have let this happen. He wouldn't have killed people with drone strikes, and that is connected to the climate crisis because the U.S. military is one of the biggest polluters and causing the climate crisis also. And so there's so many things that President Obama and the U.S. has to do in order to really claim that they are the climate leaders that they're saying they are.
Well, the drama of extreme weather and the complexities facing negotiators at the UN climate talks in Glasgow are not lost on theatres that have made sustainability central to their reopening from pandemic closures. London's National Theatre is among more than 50 in the United Kingdom, following a theatre green book that lays out how to remove thousands of tons of unsustainable material from set designs, reuse costumes, and eliminate waste. Materials for its production of Trouble in Mind, a satire of racism that opens next month, will be about 90% reused or recycled. Our environment correspondent, Ayala Kasim, has been monitoring events in Glasgow. She joins us now. Ayala, good to see you. What can you tell us about the happenings today? We hear that the US president, apart from telling some home truths about adaptation, has called out some countries in his speech.
Nice seeing you, Joker. It's been a while, right?
Certainly it has been.
Obama actually called out some people today. I mean, Russia, China, called them out that they're supposed to be at the big table having conversation on how to deal with the impact of climate change. But because they're not here, they're not taking part in the conversation. So they're just leaving Europe, UK, in some ways taking the lead. That's the situation we have here as of now.
Right, so what about the Nigerian delegation still at COP26? Some African leaders are still there too, negotiating and calling leaders to keep their promise of $100 billion for climate financing. That's a lot of money.
Yes, the African Development Bank president, that's additional, has been at the forefront. Today at the Adaptation Fund event, he still asked them, and then he actually announced the launch of the African Climate Youth Council, where they're going to sponsor African youth to deal with the impact of climate change. And then we've been having some announcements on the Adaptation Fund, like today, I think about $232 million has been announced this morning, has been added to the Adaptation Fund, the promise to the Adaptation Fund this morning. And then we have the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs at the Nigerian Pavilion today, talking about how Nigeria is going to form partnership here, and then how we're going to deal with the impact of climate change. Because today is actually Adaptation Day and Loss and Damage Day. Those are how you're going to deal with the impact of climate change, and how you're going to the people that have suffered, how they need to be helped to deal with the impact of climate change. So that's the focus today, and that's what the Nigerian government, the Nigerian delegates here are also looking for, how to access the climate finance, how to build up partnership, and that's the focus of today, basically. That's what we have here.
Right, before I let you go, just one more question for you. So it's $100 billion. The target now is to get it, by 2023. How is this going to be spread?
So it's you have to show you have to go with your plan. The usual way it is. You go with your plan, what you intend to do with all this. But then what people have been asking for here is, don't just because they've been policing how this fund is going to. We need to be policed, but then don't make it look as if you spend 80% of the money that you promised us, and then even the 20% we don't even have access to it. So they're trying to say, okay, while you're giving this morning, you have to sort of let us understand, give us a bit of leeway, let it be from the grassroots, let the grassroots be able to access this sum, because they are the ones that suffer the impact of climate change the most. It's not just you saying that there's this fund and then you would just determine how we're going to spend it. So you have to let us you have to give us a leeway as to how we're going to, where we're going to spend it on, because we know where the problems are. So those are the modalities as well that people are trying to sort out here. It's not just asking for the money, it's about asking them to, there's sort of a bit of a freedom as to how you can actually access the fund and how you're going to spend it as well.
All right, thank you so much for that update. Our environment correspondent, Ayala Kasim, in Glasgow for us there. Let's move on to other stories. In the United States, the U.S. physical infrastructure is getting an overhaul that has been decades in the making. Our Washington correspondent, Maria Bird, has more on this.
Vote, the yeas are 228 and the nays are 206. The motion is adopted.
The U.S. House Democrats passed a $1 trillion infrastructure bill late Friday night, 228 to 206 vote, substantial triumph for Biden's Democrats. This bill focuses on upgrading century-old roads, airports, and bridges in the U.S.
Finally, Infrastructure Week. I'm so happy to say that, Infrastructure Week. We did something that's long overdue, that long has been talked about in Washington, but never actually been done. The House of Representatives passed an Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. That's a fancy way of saying a bipartisan infrastructure bill, a once-in-a-generation investment that's going to create millions of jobs, modernize our infrastructure, our roads, our bridges, our broadband, a whole range of things, to turn the climate crisis into an opportunity.
Democrats still have a long way to go as the $1.75 trillion social policy and climate change bill only cleared a procedural vote on Saturday morning.
Some members want more clarification or validation of numbers that have been put forth, that it's top line, that it is fully paid for.
President Biden's social policy and infrastructure bills together would be the largest bill passed in a generation to include major expansions to social services in the U.S. From Washington, Maria Bird, Channels Television News.
The United States today reopened all its borders to vaccinated individuals from about 33 countries in the world, ending a 20-month travel ban. Just as Europe battles a rise in COVID cases, the reopening means families and friends separated since the start of the pandemic can now be reunited with loved ones for the first time in months. Here's more in our Global Update report.
Travelers excited at the prospect of seeing family and friends in the United States for the first time since the pandemic started took off early on Monday from London following the lifting of U.S. travel restrictions. The extraordinary U.S. travel restrictions, first imposed in early 2020, had barred access to non-U.S. citizens traveling from 33 countries. From Monday, travelers who can show official proof of vaccination against COVID-19 and have had a recent negative viral test can fly to the United States.
So when the Biden administration announced that the U.S. border will be opened, we saw a 600% increase. The flights today are full, of course, over the next few days. So it has a major impact between announcement, between the opening and what we're seeing. And people are starting to book for, of course, actually November and December. So what we call near-in bookings are high, as you can imagine, which tells us that there is pent-up demand of 2 years yet to fly to the U.S. and elsewhere.
The wait is over in Germany after 20 months of being banned from entering the country. Tourists and business travelers are allowed to fly to the U.S. again. Crowds gathered at Frankfurt's Lufthansa check-in, as well as in Paris and London. For Germany's largest airline, flights to the U.S. are a lucrative business. In November alone, Fraport expects up to 400,000 more passengers because of U.S. travel. It is the same for excited Belgian travelers who checked in for flights to the United States on Monday as the U.S. lifted travel restrictions for foreign passengers, with many facing the prospect of seeing friends and family for the first time in 20 months. The restrictions, first imposed in early 2020, had barred access to non-U.S. citizens traveling from 33 countries, including China, India and much of Europe, and had also restricted overland entry from Mexico and Canada. The extraordinary U.S. travel restrictions, first imposed in early 2020, had barred access to non-U.S. citizens traveling from 33 countries, including India and much of Europe, and had also restricted overland entry from Mexico and Canada. Travelers who can show official proof of vaccination against COVID-19 and have had a recent negative viral test can again fly to the United States.
In other news, as lawsuits began to fly against rapper and producer Travis Scott over the tragedy at the ASTROWORLD Festival, one of the victims, Danish Beg, has been buried by family in Texas. Grieving family and friends of the 27-year-old have hailed him as a hero. At least 8 people died and many others were injured after a crowd surged forward just as rapper Travis Scott was on stage at the festival on Friday night.
We lost our brother. We're grieving for all the families that lost their loved ones in this horrendous event. People that took part in this event, Travis Scott's team, the NRG team, everybody who was associated with this should be held accountable for the lives that were lost today. And the day of, we're grieving, we're in pain. We want you guys to know our brother was the most amazing person ever to us. But we're really, really hurt. We're grieving with you guys, and we just want you to know we're here. We're going to stay here, and we're gonna get justice for them. We're gonna make it happen. You go to a concert to have fun. You don't go to a concert to die. My brother was trying to save her, and he did. He saved her, and it cost him his life.
More on this sad incident that happened on Friday. A security expert who routinely deals with large events cautions against speculating about where to place the blame on the deadly stampede at the festival.
They're going to want to see the security plan. They're going to review that with a fine-tooth comb. Then they're going to go back to law enforcement and check on the protocols, the SOPs that were for those events. Because again, that location is set up for events with large amounts of people that are going to be yelling. And I couldn't imagine people being more rowdy at a concert than they would be at a football game. So I think that, it's set up for that. So I'm not sure what they would start at. So probably just start with a security plan. But I think part of them being in an NFL stadium, I don't know if you've been to a stadium, NFL stadium, they have cameras everywhere. So I'm pretty sure the footage is going to be caught, and they're going to review the video, and they're going to see where the incidents happen. They're going to see where maybe the things that they planned for may have broken down. They had to move to plan B and plan C and so on and so forth. So I think that's going to be a large part of it, is the video footage. So in those type of situations, yeah, you could border people off and do whatever. You're going to have movable structures just in case there's an emergency. We all seen what happened in Las Vegas with the shooting. So imagine if there were immovable or permanent structures there and people were trying to get out, and then that became a big thing of we couldn't leave because we were blocked in by these structures. So, I mean, we kind of got to wait and see what the new protocol is going to be, because I'm sure it's going to echo nationwide, maybe worldwide, from this event.
Our correspondent in Washington, Maria Bird, joins us now. Maria.
Good afternoon. Good evening.
Yeah, good evening. So we're going to be talking about a few issues coming out of the United States, but let's begin with the latest on the ASTROWORLD Festival crash and those lawsuits coming at Travis Scott. What more can you tell us about this?
Those lawsuits that are coming forth are all related to those who died, the 8 individuals that died, those that were injured, and even some survivors of the actual concert are now suing whether or not it's Live Nation, the promoters for the event, the actual Travis Scott as well, and those responsible for putting on the event and those organizers of the event. And it's really focusing on this is a preventable, potentially stampede and disaster that occurred. That's what the lawsuits are going to focus on because of the large number of crowds that they knew were coming. And they're saying that several of the individuals in the crowd were letting the promoters know, letting Travis Scott and his team know while they were performing of what was actually occurring on the floor during the stampede. So this is going to be a very, very fine-tooth comb investigation that's going to happen. And it's going to be one that I think is going to set a precedence for how these types of very large event concerts take place and are organized moving forward.
Right. So Maria, a security expert just spoke, and he said that there should be caution on placing blame on anyone at this moment. What can you say about that?
That obviously, from a security perspective, and obviously they had high level and very many security individuals on the ground, and obviously security company that was secured for the event. But those who are suing the event organizers and Travis Scott are obviously the victims, and they were there on the ground knowing exactly what was occurring and what might have occurred that they didn't experience in other types of concerts that they had attended. So they're going to use all of that evidence and all of those claims to be able to support their lawsuits against the event.
So let's move quickly to the COVID-19 issues. The U.S. reopened its borders to vaccinated international travelers today. Explain to us again the criteria for entering the country and the position on COVID testing.
COVID testing at this time is part of the process the U.S. has had in place, even for Americans traveling overseas and out of the country when they come back into the U.S. And so that protocol is one that I don't see moving anywhere at this time. We know the vaccine requirement for coming in. We know that this is the first day of really testing out all the protocols and procedures. And obviously those travelers who have uploaded their information prior to even going to the airport are probably going to get through the process much faster. We'll probably know sometime later today or tomorrow the actual impact of all these procedures and the actual opening of the borders to those internationally.
And finally, what's the update on that infrastructure bill, the win for the Biden administration?
That infrastructure bill has obviously been one of the highlights, I think, of President Biden's administration thus far. We know that President Biden has obviously been feeling somewhat of a backlash, especially as we had those most recent elections and feeling like his party is not at the forefront. But I think this infrastructure bill is what he's hoping will be able to lead the country forward, will be able to gain back confidence in his administration. But most importantly, I think he believes this is going to be a bill of generations to be able to change the outlook of roads, bridges, and the overall physical structure of America. But he's also going to be pushing forward with some of the climate change and social service and social policy bill that is $1.7 trillion. He's hopeful that that will obviously move through so that he can definitely put forth and put his stamp on his administration.
Thanks again, Maria, for that. Our Washington correspondent, Maria Bird.
Thank you for having me.
Well, finally on the program, India's state of Tamil Nadu is currently dealing with more than 20 centimeters of floodwater caused by heavy rains inundating streets and houses. Chennai, the state capital, along with 11 other districts were affected as well. One resident said it has been difficult to secure essential items such as food for the past 3 days. The government has yet to offer much help. Heavy rainfall is expected to continue, but not at the same intensity of the past 24 hours. The Meteorological Department has also issued a moderate to high threat of flash floods warning in certain parts of southern India, while the Tamil Nadu State Disaster Management Authority said it was inspecting certain low-lying areas. Did I say finally? Well, the final story for you now. Back here in West Africa, artists like Nigerians ABDULRAHMAN, YUSUF are increasingly using non-fungible tokens, or NFTs, a type of digital asset that uses blockchain to record the ownership of items. With NFTs, the buyer has the status of being the official owner. It's like digital bragging rights. Well, their roaring popularity has baffled many, but the explosive growth shows no sign of abating. Let's take a listen.
Nigerian artist ABDULRAHMAN YUSUF used to sell his work online, but in May, he was introduced to non-fungible tokens, NFTs, which he said presented life-changing opportunities and has since increased the number of pieces he can sell at higher prices. NFTs are a type of digital asset which use blockchain to record the ownership of items such as images, videos, and other collectibles. African artists like YUSUF are using NFTs, where the buyer has the status of being the official owner of goods sold. YUSUF, who lives in Nigeria's commercial capital, Lagos, said he had sold 44 digital works of various NFT platforms since joining in May.
People don't look at art like this before in Nigeria. You know, people really do not care about art, but as they've seen how, like in the Western world, how it can be an investment, it's not just to just display in your house. You know, sometimes it's a way to save money. You know, it's a way to like a heirloom for your children. You know, something you can sell later.
The growing influence of NFTs took center stage at the 4-day annual Art X Lagos, West Africa's premier international art fair. YUSUF, whose work is partly inspired by pop culture and fashion, sold one piece at the fair but did not reveal the price. His most expensive piece before the fair cost 2.2 Ethereum.
That's the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Joke Rogers.